So to be embodied, to be on this path of embodiment, is really to just slow the fuck down. Is to slow down to such an extent that we can feel each aspect of our experience moment by moment. Now, it sounds great, but of course that is going to take some work. For many of us, we are habitually conditioned to be on the go 24/7 in our heads, figuring out our next move, either distracting ourselves on our phone, Netflix, food, cigarettes, drinking, whatever your thing is. We all have them, I certainly do. But the practice of embodiment and how it looks on daily life, how it looks in daily life, is to really slow down. Is to slow down and to come into each moment as it really is. And if you think about the day-to-day experience or the moment-by-moment experience, quite often we're trying to fill it up. We're trying to fill each moment up with something. We're trying to get this moment to mean something, to make it be something, make it count. But if we looked a bit deeper, if we could feel in a moment-by-moment type of way, if we could slow down, we would see that many of us, or we would feel rather, that many of us have a feeling of hollowness or emptiness inside. There's often this feeling of emptiness, like there's something not quite right, there's something missing. There's something missing within our experience. And we look for this missing piece outside of ourselves, and that's why we try to fill it up. That's why we try to distract ourselves and escape from this feeling. But this is the embodiment. This is the embodiment. When we slow down moment by moment and we get in touch with what's really going on, well, we see that it's not the going on the phone that is the issue. It's not the, eating 10 packets of crisps. What is the issue? No, it's much more fundamental. It's much more primal, and it's much more somatic, meaning that the issue, if we want to call it that, is that we have a feeling of emptiness and hollowness inside of us, and it is very, very painful. It's a painful experience to feel empty. It's almost like a feeling of a subtle feeling of despair. It's just making me think now of the quote which you may have heard of, that men live lives of quiet desperation. And I think this quiet desperation that quote points to, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I know it's something like that, is that the feeling of emptiness, the feeling of desperation, the feeling of despair, which, to some extent we all feel. We all feel this, and it's actually in slowing down and feeling into that and actually being with it in a moment by moment process that we can start to heal. We can start to fill that space, not with something outside of ourselves, but with something that is more sustainable, which is our awareness. It's our occupying the inner reality of who we are. We're not running from ourselves. We're not trying to get away from who we are or what it is we're experiencing. We're feeding our awareness into that void. We're feeding our awareness into that feeling of despair, that feeling of not being good enough, that feeling of emptiness, ultimately, that there's something missing. And what we find is, because we've never been taught this, remember, what we find is that we can nourish that part of ourselves quite easily and quite naturally. It's not a difficult job, really. We've just been conditioned to think and feel as though this hollowness, this emptiness that so many of us have, needs to be fixed from outside, or it needs to be filled and healed from an outside source. But that's always going to create anxiety. That's always going to be a stressful situation, because you're never always going to have what you need. Even if you live in a spiritual community and everybody's hugging every 2 seconds, like eventually it's going to give you anxiety. It's not really going to heal that wound. You have to feel through the hollowness, the emptiness. And when we start to feel through it or feel into it, there's almost like a pattern of nourishment that starts to build. If I feel that emptiness, if I feel that hollowness inside, which I can, I'm really familiar with this feeling. If I stay with it in a way that allows me to bring my awareness into it in the deepest possible way I can in that moment, something happens where I start to shift from being hollow and empty to being full and satisfied. And it's quite often a process of being with the initial stages where you feel the resistance, you don't want to do it, it's the most uncomfortable feeling in the world, to simply just turning our attention towards the feeling of emptiness and just breathing with it. And just in a few, it's crazy, just in a few short moments, a minute tops, 30 seconds, you actually start to feel that, oh, actually it's not too bad. It's not too bad. I can be with this. I can actually be with this. God, this one feeling, this one experience is governing my entire life and dictates where and what I do, where I go with my life, what I do with my life, who I spend time with, how I spend my time, like what I do in terms of, my habits and addictions and all that kind of stuff. Like, this one feeling is governing and influencing all of that. And we're so afraid of it. We're so afraid of this emptiness. We're so afraid to actually give it some attention. We're so afraid to even acknowledge that I feel hollow and empty inside on some level, that we don't even go there. We won't even look at it. We push it out of awareness. So many people that don't even have a clue that that's how they feel. But when we start to bring attention into it, just in a few moments, just giving it our full attention, let's say a minute tops, it starts to soften. We start to see that it's not so bad. And, it's understandable, because that feeling for most of us, if not all of us, come from childhood. There was a moment, or quite a lot of moments in childhood, where we felt despair, we felt we needed something from our mum and she didn't give it to us. Maybe it was a hug, or we wanted a toy, or we wanted a sweet, or something, anything. It didn't have to be some crazy, wild, traumatic event, but for a little boy or a little girl, that's how it felt. It felt somatically really, really desperate, really, really difficult. And that feeling as a child was too much for us to handle. It was too much for us to handle. And we still believe that 20, 30, 40, 50 years on, that feeling is still too much to handle. But it's not the truth. And that's why when we do give this feeling of emptiness a little bit of attention, a little bit of energy, we start to see, actually, it's not too bad. Like it's bad. It's a bit rough. It's like, okay, it doesn't feel great. And there's certainly a point where there's a little bit of fear that comes up around directing our attention inside. But when we get past it, it's like, no, I can actually handle this. Like, everything's all right. It's not as bad as I thought it was as a child. But the truth is, that child that experienced that is also with us now in a very, very real somatic way, So we as adults need to be, because also we have an adult self that's here now, and we have a child self, and we have all of these, we have multiple hundreds of child selves, and we have hundreds and multiples of adult selves, and we need to find a way to move forward, integrating this childlike self and this adult self that we now take ourselves to be. And we need to do what is right or what we couldn't do back then because we didn't have the resource and the capabilities and the capacity to give ourselves what we needed then, because obviously we was children. We couldn't support ourselves in the way that we can now. And that's where I want to go with this. We can support ourselves. We can take responsibility. We can be independent, you know. We can give ourselves what we need, and that is serious power. There's serious strength in being able to give yourself what you need. I'm not saying don't reach out to a friend if you're having a bad day, or you know, if you're really in a dark place, like bringing a therapist or whatever. But moment by moment, many of us have this stuff going on, and we'll look to things like phones and cigarettes, or you know, whatever your vice is, to distract ourselves. And people don't know that we do this. You know, we keep it to ourselves. It's our private little world, our private little vice, and it's all to do with hiding this feeling. Reaching out to people is great. That's like a healthy thing to do, of course. But the most healthy, the most powerful, the most profound thing that we can do when it comes to this hollowness that many of us carry inside is to feed our awareness into it, start to feel it, breathe through it, and see that we alone can handle it. We can have agency and autonomy over our own needs and wants, and our life will completely transform. Our life will completely transform. Who you are right now will completely transform. Then you will be no more, you know, because we don't realize how much of ourselves is based on this feeling of trying to get things all the time. You know, I need to take in things. I need to take in things, feed and feel, feed this feeling of hollowness. You know, it dictates our life. Anyway, guys, yeah, hope that's of some use. Breathing and feeling the body as ever is the go-to for me. And yeah, maybe it can help you too. I'll speak to you again shortly. Thank you.